Hi, I'm Jim with Twisted Hobbies, and today we're building this F-22 Raptor.
Okay, welcome to the build for the F-22 Raptor. I've got my power combo, I've got my receiver. Let's get everything out of the box and inventory it. I'm using the manual from RC Factory, and it is low on instructions. They've got a lot of pictures, but the instructions are basically a picture with an arrow and stuff like that. So first we're going to fold over all of our surfaces. Remember, when you fold these over, you don't want to go too hard on them because they could crack. If they do, you just put some glue into it to fix them up. Then we're going to move on to our control horns, and I'd like to take a second and just say, if I did this again, I would definitely put the quick links onto the control horns before I glue the control horns into the surfaces. So keep that in mind. So I am gluing those in right now. It would be better if the end links were on there before I did that, just because it's a little bit harder to get in there and push them together. But now I'm putting some foam tack on the edges of this. Notice I put down some parchment paper. I learned the hard way that you glue your model to a table if you're not careful about that. I think that the foam tack is the best adhesive to use on the foam to foam connections. On some of the hardware I use CA, but for the most part I try and use foam tack. So here I'm cutting the slot open for the wing spar, coating each side with foam tack, splitting it open a little bit, and then feeding it in and making sure it's flush. I also removed all the little pieces for the tabs. Now we're ready to start on the horizontal stabilizer and elevons. And again, just foam tack those, get it into place. It's got a little tab on it so that you don't do it upside down or anything, which is great. Then working on the nose section. And again, I dry fit this, and then I found out I needed a little bit of trimming. So I was able to trim that up before I got it glued into place. And I put the foam tack on, I squish it together, and then I pull it apart for a minute to let it set up. And then once you push it together, it tacks immediately. Now we're ready for a lower vertical fuselage support. Make sure that's at 90 degrees once you get it in there. While all this is drying, I'm going to set up the radio. I'm going to make sure that it is bound and that I calibrate my ESC. There's a whole video on this in the description if you want to take a look at that, so you can get some more details on how I actually set that up. So I centered those servos, so now I can put them in and I know they're not going to be wonky with my setup. Now I'm putting together these adjustable end links, and I wish I had done this for all of them, because trying to put them on with the control horn already in the plane is a little harder to do. So I have this little block set up so that way I can put the clip down and then press the end link in through it. I'll have a little video here that shows you some more detail on that, and that's probably the easiest way to install those end links. So I'm getting my servos set, getting my horns onto the servos after I got my end links into there. And all of this stuff is going to be kind of inaccessible once we close it up. So it's important that you double check it, triple check it, make sure it's all good. And now we're ready for the vertical fuselage edge pieces. And those kind of bend from the front back. The tabs are nice because they only really fit in there one way. Next, we're going to be doing the control horns for the elevator, and I sand these up a little bit before I glue them in. It's probably not necessary, but it keeps them in there a little bit better. Moving on to the push rods. We only have 2 push rods, we only have 2 servos, but we have all sorts of crazy control with the plane. On these push rods, I'm going to first glue on the snap links, and then we're going to move the heat shrink over the connection, and then we'll snap those into the elevator and feed it through the ailerons and then to the servo, and then tighten up those adjustable end links. There is a handy little hole that allows you to tighten those. At first I thought that I had installed them incorrectly, but they put a little hole in there so that you can adjust it. So I thread these all the way through, make sure the snap link gets all the way through the control horn, And you may notice here that I have removed the push rods because I forgot to put in the push rod guides, the little standoffs. So I had to take those back out, glue those in, and then reinstall the push rod. So make sure that the little standoffs are installed, and then we're able to tighten that back up. On the adjustable end links, just don't over tighten. You can break or kink your carbon fiber push rod if you do that, so just snug it up. Now we're ready for the motor mount. I sanded it up to make sure it's got some good grip going, and then I glue it on. I set the whole thing up off of the table a little bit so that way the motor mount would be able to stick all the way through. I'm just doing it on top of a roll of paper towels. Next, I'm going to be mounting the motor, the ESC, and the receiver permanently in place. Again, we're going to put the bottom onto here. We won't really be able to get to this unless you cut in an access hatch or something like that, but I haven't found a need to. Once I put them in, they were good to go. I used a little chip clip here to hold the ESC while the glue was setting up. And now we're ready to install the bottom part of the fuselage. I'm going to put some glue on all the surfaces, get it tucked into place, and then go back and deal with any areas that still need a little bit more glue. And now we are ready to install the canopy onto the upper fuselage. And we just put some foam tack on there. Let it tack up a little bit and then press it into place. Then we're ready to install it onto the plane. I always like to set this to the side of where it's going to go. Here I am doing the dry fit. And once it's to the side, you can definitely see where to place the glue and where not to. And I'm giving it a good bead all the way across and making sure I get some up underneath the nose. Get it into place, use a square, make sure it's at 90 degrees. And then we're ready to do the rudders, or vertical stabilizers, since they're not really rudders. Get them all glued into place, and then using my square to make sure everything is at 90 degrees. Going back to the vertical fuselage, checking it. I really like the foam tack because as it sets up, you're able to adjust it and get it right into place. Then we're ready to put the prop on. And it's a little bit tricky to get it on into this area, but it's still doable. Using my Twisted Hobbys O-ring installer. That thing has been such a time saver. Then we're ready to set our CG. I'm using the manual recommended 470 millimeters back from the nose of the plane. And I marked that with just a little Sharpie on top. I have a little balancing fulcrum here that I have left over from the Mustang build, so I'm using that to balance the plane, and I was trying to see if I could balance it using one of the 3S 450 batteries, and that is a no-go. It is far too light, but everybody seems to be using two of these batteries in a saddle configuration on either side of the fuselage and then hooking them up in parallel, and so I had to make a little parallel cable for this. I haven't routed that through quite yet, but it just goes over the top of the fuselage. Now I'm putting on some Velcro. I always use fuzzy side Velcro on the plane and hook side Velcro on the batteries themselves. I know people are going to be upset about that one, but you can use whichever Velcro you want. After this, we are done with the build and ready to fly. Okay, first things first, when I get it flying, I am looking for trim, trying to figure out if it's trying to roll on its own or pull up or down, see how it's balanced, see if I need to move the center of gravity. I can move the batteries around a little bit on their Velcro and do some fine tuning. I'm sorry about the actual airplane noise in the background on this Maiden, but I am near an airport, so they're coming overhead. Don't worry, I got authorization to fly here. So it's able to do all the loops and super fast rolls, and at first I didn't know about this plane in the way that it flew, but the more that I play with it, the more that I enjoy how it's different from all the other 3D planes I've got. The one thing is that you do have to set it up with elevons, which depending on your controller is a little tricky, and once you get it set, then it's not a big deal. I do a couple slow flybys, also some inverted flight, which it did a really great job with. It was really well balanced, didn't tend to pull up or push down too hard. I got a couple high alpha maneuvers into there and almost some hovering, but since there's no rudders, you gotta kind of power out of it once it gets a little sketchy. When you get into the throttle, it really gets going. It's a slot prop plane, so it's going to be a little bit louder because it's a pusher, but that makes sense because it is a F-22. Well, I hope you found the build video helpful, and I hope that you enjoy your F-22 Raptor as much as I'm enjoying it. It is a kick in the pants, and we'll see you on the next build. Also, be careful when flying low. Sometimes it gets really low.